Well, Happy New Year, everyone. It is good to be back, and I hope that you're feeling as refreshed as I am and ready to go. We've actually got a new thing happening this year. We're actually doing a video podcast rather than just the podcast. So, if you want to see what actually goes on in the studio when I am talking, please feel free to follow the link below, which will take you to the YouTube clip. Anyway, Happy New Year, as I said. Often with the start of a new year, our thoughts naturally turn to new beginnings, and we hear many people making New Year's resolutions, and it's usually surrounding things like weight loss, health, fitness, that type of thing. Unfortunately, New Year's resolutions have a very bad name because more often than not, January starts with great intentions and by February, everything's fallen in a heap. So I don't know if you've experienced that as well, but I certainly have. So what I prefer to do is to set the standard for a new year. And I think it's a really good idea to reflect on last year and learn from it. For many, last year was a difficult year, and it came right on the back of 2020, which was also a bad year. But I do think that most of us have learned from the last 2 years. And if the podcast interviews that I ran last year in 2021, if they're anything to go by, there were two major lessons that we actually learned. We began to understand what we valued, and we realized that an emergency fund was a necessity and that savings are a really good idea. So I think that setting the standard for this new year on this first podcast for the year should really be surrounding those two things. This podcast, of course, is all about budgeting and money. So how can we make value part of money planning, especially when if you're the type of person where money is not really important to you, you would think, well, why do I need to plan surrounding what I value? I think the biggest thing that we said, the number one thing that we valued was family and friends. And when I think about that, I think that resetting the standard for the new year would be around what we enjoy doing. So family and friends, we enjoy catching up, going out for regular meals, maybe going camping together if we're allowed to go away on holiday, going to the beach together, maybe having games nights. Some people even started to buy more gifts because they just wanted to express how much they valued another person. And so all of that really does need to be allocated into the budget. So really, if we're resetting the standard for the new year, let's have those sort of things feature in our budget. I know one of the things that I really loved doing over the Christmas holidays, because I had some spare time, I wanted to spend some time, very specific time, with my grandchildren, and it was the turn of my female grandchildren. So I got together with 3 of my granddaughters, and we had a lovely time. We actually organised to have afternoon tea together. I broke out the fine china, which you might think was a bit scary when there was a 2 and a 4-year-old involved. But there was also a 10-year-old involved. And actually, they were amazingly good. They were very, very careful when it came to pouring out the tea and pouring out the milk and drinking from their cups very, very elegantly. It was lovely to see. So we had scones, jam and cream and a pot of tea, and we really enjoyed that. But what we also did was we made a fairy garden, which was lovely. Really enjoyed every minute of it. But when you look at all of those things, yes, it might seem like there's not much expense involved, but sometimes there could be. I mean, I've had in the cupboard tea for tea. I had the scones, jam and cream. I think I had to go and buy some jam and some cream, but I had the ingredients to make the scones. So not much of an expense there. But when it came to the fairy garden, I did have to buy a few supplies, even though I tried to gather everything around my house. I did have to go and buy decided on some artificial little tiny plants because the area that I was going to grow the fairy garden in is not very good for growing. And I needed to go and buy a little fairy and what else did I have to buy? Some paint to paint the toadstools and to paint the roof of the little fairy house. So there was some cost involved there. So when I look at that, if I want to do something like that regularly, I might need to set aside $20, $30, $40, $50 every month just to be able to spend time with my grandchildren. So it's that type of thing that I'm talking about. And unless we very definitely put those things into our budget, we will either have to steal money from another area, or we will find ourselves not being able to do it because we just do not have the money to do it. So all of those things do cost money, and it's important that we do put that into our budget. The other area we discovered needed attention was the accumulation of an emergency fund. Now, you've heard me over the years quote the fact that I think a $3,000 emergency fund is a really good idea. Now, I personally have come up with that amount, and that's the amount that I feel comfortable with. And that was really surrounding the whole idea of, well, what would I use an emergency fund for? And it would be things like if an appliance breaks down. So if my fridge, which I'm telling you is on the blink, may be using the emergency fund soon. We had to have the electrician out over the Christmas period. We're just hanging in there, but it's quite possible that I'm going to be using some of my emergency fund for that one. But if I need a new appliance, or if the hot water service broke down, and for me also having an emergency trip over to the UK was something that I wanted to have money set aside for, because my family's all over there and I wanted to be able to pop onto a plane, if I can ever get onto a plane again, but to be able to have that money there waiting to be able to do that. So that was something that was really, really important to me. But you know what I've discovered over the years is the fact that even if you have got as little as $500 in emergency fund, that is real peace of mind. So I think the main thing is to start saving and think about the types of things that your emergency fund is going to cover, and you'll come up with a decision of what you feel comfortable your emergency fund will be. And of course, we need to put that away and forget about it. It's for emergencies only. So once that's achieved, make sure that you allocate some of your regular pay to savings. So you've done your emergency fund, you've got used to saving, now let's start looking at savings. And it's an excellent discipline to adopt. Oh my goodness, we don't like the word discipline, do we? In fact, we actually hate it. But what I've noticed over the years, that anybody wanting to be able to do better on an instrument, or do better with sport, or to achieve something by expanding what they know and learning, there's always discipline involved. And I know personally, when I'm trying to gain a new skill, there's discipline in practicing and going back and learning and reading and all of that. And it's out of that discipline that we become better for it. So all of these things do require discipline, and it's no different with the management of your money. So I really want to challenge you. I'm going to start the year with a bit of a challenge. By the time we chat next week, I want you to have 3-4 things in place. How much are you going to set aside from your income to do the things you value? I mentioned about getting together with family and friends, but that might be not what you're thinking of. So how much are you going to set aside from your income for the things that you value? Secondly, how much are you going to save towards your emergency fund? And as you're saving, you'll be able to establish how much that emergency fund will be. And if you already have an emergency fund, how much would you like to be saving, and start setting that aside from your income? So I hope you enjoyed the challenge. Let me know from your comments, or send me an email, podcast@coachchris.com.au, and let's get off to a really focused, successful year. Until next week, have a great week.